Hello, everyone. It's Patrick Lovell, truth bombing and riffing on Saturday, April 22nd, 2023, approximately, actually on the money, 2 p.m. my time. And it is 8 days, 9 days, 9 days from the sort of the mile marker, the goalpost in this sort of experiment, if you will, to try to supercharge you out there. I look at my truth bomb activity and I try to understand who's watching this. I would encourage you, if you like it, to please like and subscribe. Most importantly, share. I don't know who knows what about me and what this whole process is. I can tell you that we have had 56 contributors to the tune of something like, I don't know, maybe we're up to like $1,500. So great work in a relatively short period of time. I'm going to say this is cumulatively about 6 weeks with a kind of an organic grassroots effort based on my truth bombs and other material that we float out there. But it's a far cry from the goal of 1,300. And, I think I've pretty made it clear why that number is important and why that's the first sort of rung, if you will, of the objective. And, I'll kind of go into that further a little bit, but I'm going to try to keep this short and hopefully compelling. I mean, Jesus Christ, there's so much writing on this, and it's not for me. It's for us. It's for all of us. It's quite frankly us infinitum. I I think the place I want to start is that I got a couple of remarks recently on Twitter. And it's interesting because it just personifies, I think, the sort of frustration, the aggravation, if you will, of social media in general. Because people can discover you and what you're saying at different times without knowing who you are and not really having a composite understanding of where you're coming from, and then snap to judgment. I'll tell you, I was on the Crystal Ball show with Kyle Kalinske and Crystal Ball, and I noticed, and I knew this from other interviews that I had done after our work in the con, that most people seem to interact with social media is sort of a judgment. It's like, okay, what are they thinking in the moment? They're looking at, like, your face, your smile, your eyes, what you're wearing, what you're saying, how you're saying it, and they want to judge you on that. It's like, if people that had, I don't know, a sixth grade education and not a lot of experience were, trying to absorb the world with absolutely zero context. That to me is the sort of the pitfall of social media. Obviously, on the one hand, you have the opportunity to connect with more people than we ever have at any time in the history of mankind, but then you really don't, as has been revealed by Matt Taibbi's Twitter files, but more importantly on Elon Musk basically pulling the rug on Matt Taibbi after the fact. And I can tell you I've experienced, because we've actually observed and been able to prove that I've been suppressed on Twitter. And the reason why I choose to use Twitter as kind of like my expression in social media is because I've been on Facebook for a long time. And Facebook, I felt, was reconfiguring their algorithms to just simply give us all the sort of feeling of everything's fine, and to try to minimize the discord, if you will, particularly in the volatile arena of politics and everything that comes with it, particularly after everything that happened to Facebook, or was revealed what Facebook was involved with from 2016 on, maybe even going much further back. I remember actually observing, I think this was as far back as 2012, that fans of Mitt Romney could actually engage topics of your reaction or response to specific things, Mitt Romney was involved with, and somehow tweak that into a situation that made it look like you were actually positive towards Mitt Romney. I mean, there's so many tricks of this technological engineering that it's insane. And Elon Musk, basically debt financed his way to own Twitter, paid double the market value for it, claimed it was all about free speech. And then, of course, he's an autocrat. I don't exactly know what to think about Elon Musk, but is that important for what it is that I'm trying to do and my objective to try to get 1,300 of you to join me on a tidal wave crusade to purge corruption? Yeah, maybe. It's just another example of billionaires in tech completely manipulating, creating disinformation and misinformation across the board so that you don't understand what it is that I'm revealing to you. And so, for example, going back to Twitter, I had a couple of comments over the course of the last 24 hours where, people who don't know a lot about me or where I come from or what I've done, and they're like really resistant and almost really, I mean, resistance is not the right word. It's not strong enough. They repel anybody who says they have the truth. And I get that. I understand that because it sounds sort of religious or scripture based or some sort of like, magic. And for those that are, rational, logical, educated people, that sounds just off the rails crazy train. And that's what I used to think as well. But unfortunately, I have worked very, very hard, putting tens of thousands of hours into this effort over the course of the last 13 years and millions of dollars to aggregate what is the largest revelation of the largest criminal conspiracy in the history of the world that never ended. And you can find that at www.thecon.tv. Now, all of these truth bombs are not to try to sell you to watch the con necessarily, even though I think it's absolutely necessary for anybody who wants to understand what it is exactly that I'm bringing to you. But it's not absolutely necessary in so much as, you're missing out on the details. But I think there's two things that I want to reflect on at this moment. The first is that, we didn't get on Netflix or HBO or Hulu or any of the other, maybe even second tertiary streamers, even though we had an opportunity on one of those, which one name eludes me at the moment. But one of the ones that got in trouble with Silicon Valley Bank run last or like 3 weeks ago. But when you understand what Netflix is, and you understand what HBO is, and you understand what streamers are, and Apple TV and everything else, look, their entire business model depends on the apparatus of which I am revealing to you is corrupt. Now, Wall Street's backing of debt financing projects and all of those different sorts of platforms based on revenue generation and subscriptions and all of the other things that go into the formula to make those engines run isn't the core of their, end all be all business. It's one probably sliver of it, but it's certainly huge in entertainment, right? But what you have to understand is that they're not letting projects, in fact, I don't think there is another project like ours that exists. But at the same time, it's crystal clear to me without any absolute evidence of this, it's just reading between the lines, that if you pay someone a lot of money to be an ultimate gatekeeper and they understand that they depend on debt financing the projects that they greenlight, a project that reveals how our financial system hijacked the world through grift is not something that might be advantageous to their business model. And so there's that. And so what I frequently tell people on these truth bombs, for example, is BlackRock is the largest shareholder in many of our largest platforms and media companies, whether it's Disney, whether it's Time Warner, whether it's Netflix, and so forth. They are absolutely huge in each one of those. And as I say all the time, we reveal how BlackRock came to be the most powerful company in the world. In fact, more powerful than most countries. And as I addressed recently, because of all of the mayhem that took place in France over the course of the last couple of weeks, the BlackRock offices were firebombed by protesters because of BlackRock's relationship to pensions in the French government. They were spot on. But I doubt that many of the protesters understand the details of what I've been bringing to you in these truth bombs about BlackRock's position and how they got to where they are based on the revelations that I continue to bring to you. The most important of which is that Federal Reserve Act 13.3 was used illegally to backdoor trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars to the corrupt financial system that was bankrupt by their own criminal activity. The whole thing was illegal. Nobody in media brought this attention to you. Nobody in media laid it out. Nobody in media came close. Instead, just like I just mentioned to you with regards to Netflix and Time Warner and Disney and all the rest, 7 companies own all media, including the likes of Comcast that might have ownership, of course, of MSNBC. And then whatever the parent company, actually, I bet you Fox Corp, News Corp is independent, but probably tied to somebody else. But, I had a couple of faux pas in my last truth bomb because my mind was running a mile a minute and I'm trying to respond to everything that I see in a way that's effective to try to get your attention. And that's hard without a teleprompter and scripting it and everything else. And so I made some really silly mistakes. I said something along the lines that the Dominion lawsuit settlement was like between 187 million or 487 million, and I couldn't get my head on straight because somebody on Facebook had commented because I put the right number on but the right connotation. So I said it was 787, but I accidentally said billion, and it was 787 million. Anyway, I couldn't put the number together, and then I made another mental typo when I happened to try to be making the correlation with all of the other figures that I was talking about, where it's like, put that into context to, let's just say we pushed the envelope and it was 500,000. What I meant to say was whether or not it was 500 million in context to what I continued to let you know about, that the Federal Reserve gave $29 trillion, and that's not including quantitative easing, which I think is another 13 to 14 trillion since 2009 in terms of purchasing of mortgage-backed securities and all sorts of assets that increase the wealth of the rich, particularly the ultra-rich. And so, in addition, the flip side of me revealing to you that Federal Reserve Act 13.3 was used illegally, it was used illegally in service of giving the richest people on the planet the most money. And yet now and forever, people have been like, well, wait a second, what's about disparity of wealth or tax code or, all sorts of mayhem in these specific arenas, and yet all of this sort of upside in others. And that's all connected to what it is I'm telling you, in addition to all of the other social problems, especially on Earth Day that we have. I happened to, before I pushed, play on this, I happened to see a bunch of, sort of standard declarations or platitudes by the likes of Bernie Sanders, and others, where it's like, we've got to double down and we've got all of these problems that we've got to fix as it relates to climate change and so forth. But meanwhile, Uncle Bernie, somebody that I've liked and I admired, and if you saw my first film, Forward 13, Waking Up the American Dream, you know that the whole film was basically crescendoed by Bernie's stance on the floor of the House back in, I think it was 2008, as a result of these insane giveaways. In fact, it was Bernie who initiated the audit alongside, I think, the representative, I can't think of his name, out of Florida, and I think also Rand Paul might have been involved to help with the audit, but it then led to this deep dive analysis by the Levy Institute that got these figures and what they mean, which the mainstream media never bothered to reveal. And the intersection was, of course, the con, and what we show you in the con, which was a massive grift from beginning to end. And again, it's at www.thecon.tv, which lays out how the whole scheme worked. And I happened to, attend last night. I was at a function with a bunch of engineers, and I was thinking to myself as I was listening to these people talk and how they interacted that never in a million years could these types of people think that what I'm revealing to you is possible. Because in their profession, they have to be professionals. And if they're not, they get fired because it's pretty easy to hide a huge mistake that leads to some sort of collapse. But that's what we allow in finance all the time. So it's like, why? But going back to media and Uncle Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and AOC and everyone else who you think are the good guys in this thing, people give money freely to these campaigns and their causes and everything else, and yet they haven't accomplished anything. over the course of the last 13 years? Nothing. They sound good in a soundbite, on a platform like, I don't know, Rachel Maddow, for example, but they accomplish nothing. And a lot of time it's double talk, and a lot of time it's misinformation and it's manipulation, and a lot of time it's straight out lying. I can tell you that right now, one of the biggest disappointments of my life, well, two of them are Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, for a lot of reasons. But I only make the point now, not to debate it for a long time, but just simply that there is no one who's going to fix the problems of corruption. If you think those guys on the left, you can like roll your eyes and go, yeah, you're right. They didn't do anything. Or in addition to that, Sherrod Brown, right? For example, somebody that actually knows probably everything, quite frankly, but has not been able to galvanize a campaign outside of, way back in the day when he was working with Vitter out of Louisiana to try to create the Brown-Vitter Act to break up Too Big to Fail. He's been basically, they all had to bend the knee to the financial system that completely runs the show. And there's a lot of reasons why that happened. I could go on for days about details that I have access to, but if you think they're bad, just think about McCarthy or Green or Bobart or Jordan or I think I already mentioned. Oh, who I was about to say is who everybody's favorite Costanza, George Santos, right? And so look, nobody in this co-opted, corrupt duopoly have the answers. If the environment's your, main issue, good luck. Guns, good luck. Anything, prison reform, systemic predation, blah, 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 all of it. None of it can happen without purging corruption. And that's what this whole movement is about. It's a tidal wave populist crusade to purge corruption. And ultimately, this is all in service to what I'm building called the Clean New Deal. Now, as it stands, we are, well, let me come back to that. A couple of other sort of revelations just in terms of media, okay? So right before I pressed play on this, I was reading an op-ed by the CEO of Dominion, which were the voting booths that just got the $797 million settlement from Fox, and apparently it was wired right away. And I read through it, and I read through, all of the things that they had to go through to be able to get the discovery, which is extremely important, which is exactly what the con does in terms of something infinitely larger in terms of the 2008 great financial crisis. That's exactly what the con is. Ultimately, the CEO was like, look, we had to delve in here and do this and do that because of this, and like our employees were threatened and basically given death threats and that sort of thing because of just the outrageous behavior of what was fueled by Fox because of this almost like hyena-like just insanity that overwhelmed and has overwhelmed and continues to overwhelm the Republicans. That's completely toyed by and propagandized by Fox News. And the question I had after it said in the comments section, bravo to you and your team for doing this, and congratulations on the victory. But my question is, why are we relying on Dominion to get discovery? Knowing what I know as a muckraking journalist and a producer of what it is that I've done to reveal the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that never ended, and I'm one guy, and I had certainly had a team of very important and capable people, and I couldn't have done it without everybody involved. But I was the driving force to be able to find everything that we found in the con to reveal to you how the whole thing worked. And the question I have to the New York Times is, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me that the New York Times, the nation's paper of record within the context of what? The Pentagon Papers, right? Watergate, and so many other things that we depend on a national news platform that everybody looks to do the investigation that has the resources that didn't. We're only talking about the insurrection here. A lot of people in media try to make this whole thing about Rupert Murdoch. Once again, in this sort of high school jocularity of look at how bad their corruption is versus ours. Yeah, Rupert Murdoch was a big part of this, but the bottom line, this is in service of the insurrection to foment a coup. And I'll, pull back the lens and I'll ask the January 6th committee and, Jack Smith and all of the investigators into Trump and everything else. Are you seriously not looking into other elements that helped Mind Hive the ability to get thousands of MAGA demonstrators, many of whom were from special forces, and I'm assuming that was Blackwater, or police officers that skewed MAGA to come from around the country to do the opposite of what this lying sack of you-know-what Tucker Carlson recreated based on having to cherry pick from 46,000 hours of footage that he got hand-delivered to himself from the Speaker of the House, McCarthy, which is insane. In the time period that I grew up in, all of these platforms would have just been nuked by advertisers just saying, we don't want to have anything to do with it. But yet, we've got a $787 million settlement and apparently more to come. But in service of what? What the front page of the New York Times is saying is that Fox viewers won't allow Fox to tell them the truth. What? I mean, that's yellow journalism 101. I mean, that's, what was the film that was so wonderful that was about William Randolph Hearst in the fictional way? What was his sled? Red something or other. I can't think of the name of it, but you get my drift, right? For anybody that's on the tip of your tongue. So in the last week or so, 2 weeks, what have we seen, guys? I mean, you can't escape this. You've seen one of the major news platforms that reaches millions of people, could reach tens of millions of people, but I think they get like 3 million viewers a night, which is tiny in comparison to a lot of people online. But nevertheless, and their business model is lying. So that's in journalism. And then what else did we have revealed? Well, we had revealed that Clarence Thomas, a Supreme Court justice, is on the take for this Dallas billionaire that he's had a relationship with for 2 decades. And this guy's got some sort of fetish for Hitler memorabilia. I got it right that time. And, it's insane. I mean, the corruption, if you can't see that based on the payments and everything that went to Clarence Thomas's wife, and the trips and the real estate and everything else, it's like, oh my God. And you got to ask yourself, okay, what else is going on in the Supreme Court, right? But I mean, this is just so over the top, disgraceful. And I've continued to tell you, so that's 2 of the 3 centers of power, the Supreme Court, media, okay? Now, all of media is doing the same exact thing Fox is, just a different degree of it because they're not telling you what it is that I'm telling you. Same with the judiciary, and this is how it works with the judiciary. So what we reveal to you, and I have been through my truth bombs and everything else, is that everything that Trump is being investigated for and going to be held accountable for, and what he's guilty of, and which we see play out in front of our eyes every single night, he is a reflection and an expression and an extension of everything that I'm telling you, especially what we're now seeing unfold with the New York AG's office as it relates to documentation fabrication, as well as the investigation down in Georgia, which may lead to racketeering. And I'll remind you that in the con, we found the only RICO conviction of this entire crime in the entire country that should have been used by the FBI and the DOJ to take down Wall Street, but didn't. And how do I know that? Well, because I talked to the guys who are the head guys at the Department of Justice and the FBI that told us that and how that happened. Once again, that's in www.thecon.tv. It's incredible. But then all of the other aspects of the fraud and everything that goes into the pipeline that made all this stuff possible, that blew up the world, that not only is in the con, but we have a podcast on that you can find on just by doing a Google search called The New Untouchables. And then if you go to my YouTube page at Patrick Level Truth Bombs the Con and you pull down from the pull down menu on live, you'll see I did a 13-hour, actually 11-hour filibuster back on November 1st of 22. It was like 1 plus 1 equals 2. It was just added all up. That's why we chose that date, where we had volunteers and people from around the country show up at the Federal Reserve to express that they weren't foam on the runway for the crashing financial system. And I made the case of why all of it happened, that the entirety of media has hidden from us this whole time to reveal how this whole system works. And so the judiciary, and I didn't finish the point about the judiciary. The judiciary used tens of millions of pieces of documentation fraud, similar to what we're seeing on display with Donald Trump with the, and I think that's going to come through Jack Smith, which is the investigations of documentation fabrication for the elector certification through Giuliani, for example. Okay? So the media is all, well, at least some of the media, Rachel Maddow, for example, is all up in arms about this and have been, and justifiably so. But again, in comparison, We're talking about tens of millions of pieces of documentation fraud that changed the level of standing, that basically railroaded millions of people out of their houses, particularly the elderly and a lot of female elderly. And like we show you in the con, an African American woman who was a widow who lived in her house for 4 decades, who owned her house, who got set up in a straw buying situation, who was left with the choice of either going to the streets for her years in the 90s in cold Cleveland, Ohio, or was Akron, Ohio, or shoot herself. She chose the latter, 5 times in the chest, and she died 6 months later. She's the expression, right, of the murder of the American dream. And so I've got all of this and much, much more. And I'm desperately trying to get you to understand that when you invest in what it is that I'm doing with this movement to purge corruption, it's not charity. As a matter of fact, I would love to at the right time if I could, because of just the nature of media, I would love to prop up an opportunity to build our own platform where I offered for the first, 10,000 investors based on a certain, marker, some sort of IPO shareholder ownership in a company that could change the world based on truth being our business model as opposed to the lies that have engineered and hijacked our government and all of our media. I would love to do that at the right time. I'm not prepared to do that. What I am prepared to do is tell you that if you invest $13 and then you recruit 13 other people to what we're doing, then I can help educate the millions of people to start to elevate these truths that I'm riffing on with a much more effective execution in a way that can build and build and build and build from a grassroots level. That which this system of corruption, lies, and deception and deceit can't ignore. And we plow them, we bulldoze them like they bulldozed millions of Americans. And again, at the end and the beginning of this, no matter how you carve it up, Federal Reserve Act 13.3 was used illegally. And why was it used illegally? Because the entirety of the financial system was bankrupt. It was bankrupted based on its own illegal deceptive acts and practices and illegal reps and warranties, which are on display once again at the www.thecon.tv. And what we ultimately did was we had several different investigations and settlements that say almost everything that I lay out to you, but not as effective and not nearly as much. We got this from the Federal Crisis Inquiry Commission, which actually had over 1,000 interviews over the course of a year. And ultimately, it led to 11 criminal referrals featuring the most important that's in the con, once again at www.thecon.tv, that reveals that Robert Rubin and Citigroup were, ignoring Richard Bowen, who was a whistleblower who was in the con, evidence that they were, pilfering, illegal securities to the tune of $80 billion a year. In the aftermath, they buried Richard Bowen and Robert Rubin, who was former Secretary of the Treasury under the Clinton administration, who was very much a part of the engineering, the structure of the president's working group that deregulated everything that led to this madness. And then he ultimately took over at Citi, and he walks with $126 million, and Citi got $3 trillion for burying the truth, which buried millions and millions of pensioners, okay? It's financial terrorism. It's beyond your wildest comprehension. It's Godzilla, and it never ended. And so when I keep talking about the $29 trillion in 2009, that was the real coup d'etat. The coup d'etat didn't happen on January 1st of 2020. It happened or 2021. It happened in November, I think. I can't remember what the exact date was, but that's when we were able to provide the emergency liquidity, again, for a bankrupted financial sector that got bankrupted by their own criminality, and all of their assets were worth nothing. They were insolvent. So just based on the statutes, the Federal Reserve couldn't loan to them, but they did because of the inside revolving door that people like Elizabeth Warren talk about through, platitudes and inferences, and same with Sherrod Brown, but they never spell it out the way I'm spelling it out. And same with Bernie, and same with everybody else. And so you get to this point to understand that yours truly has over 300 hours on the shelf of all of this stuff and then some that I was going to put into season 2 of the con, but I can't get out there because it's too expensive to produce without a market. And so far, the truth has no value. And nobody's buying at the major networks because of where they get their financing. So what I'm suggesting to you is when you invest $13 into this, what we're going to do is we're going to build a podcast featuring all of the people that I have that have these answers to break through all of this madness, where we, hit the rewind back maybe now a month ago with the bank runs with Silicon Valley Bank and Silvergate Bank and Republic Bank and also what happened in Europe, but they just plowed trillions of dollars or billions of dollars in to save those, and who knows what's coming next. And but then all the way through the revelations of everything Trump and all the things of Fox News and all of the things of Clarence Thomas. I mean, guys, again, nobody is going to be able to smack this corruption in the face like I can with the details. And so we'll continue to do that with our podcast in a way that it continues to get the message out, to get more people involved, to get even those that have bigger audiences than us to hopefully pay attention to what we're doing if we can trend. Because the way it works now, the business model for everything, as opposed to me. So again, you might be asking yourself, Patrick, why are you asking me for money? Why don't you fund it? I've already spent $4 million to make this happen. Not me personally, I got that from a partner, but I was able to make it happen because I'm a producer, and that's what I do. You want to match me? I would love for you to match me. But until we get there, let's just try to get off on the first base. And if I can raise $16,900 minus $1,500, so let's call it $15,400 roughly between now and next week, or I should say the 30th of April, then we can get organized as the 501c3. I can get my staff going. I can create this podcast, and then we can start to churn out more and more information that will grow and grow and grow. My ultimate goal is to get 13 million people on board if we had a war chest of 169 million. And again, I say $13. I'm not asking you for $1,300. I'm not asking you to invest anything more than that. I just want you to get 13 and then 13 people. And if you bring that to the table, then you will have we will make sure we figure out a way to make either a bumper sticker or a t-shirt available with our hashtags on them. And we've got some fabulous hashtags, everything from hashtag the righteous grind to hashtag truth is, failure is not an option. It's not rocket science, it's rocketeering. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. Rise, roar, revolt, and ultimately the clean new deal and onwards and upwards. And I'm sure there's a few others. We've got to get signs in people's yards. We've got to get bumper stickers out there. We got to get t-shirts. We got to build an army. We've got to get millions of people on board, because it's not the business model of the media to tell the truth. It's not the business model to let the truth get out there on networks that are dependent upon investment from the bankrupt, they're not bankrupt anymore. They should have been, but morally bankrupt and criminal financial system that continues to loot the Federal Reserve with impunity. And 2009 wasn't the only time it happened. It happened in 2019. There was $22 trillion that got plugged into the system because of some sort of derivatives run based on SoftBank, and nobody knows exactly what happened. And then we had COVID after the fact. Meanwhile, we have climate side, we have never-ending problems with, not being able to fix the situation with our dependence on fossil fuels, not to mention, everything else I mentioned earlier. So I probably talked more than I wanted to, but did I lay out the case? Was I effective? Am I a likable guy? I had people, like I said earlier in this truth bomb, question me, and they repel. They're like, anybody who says they have the truth, I'm not listening. Meanwhile, the situation is a menagerie and a circus, an ocean of madness of lies, and everybody sees that. I continue to tell you over and over and over. Fact check me. Check out everything that I've done. You want to go further? Then go read the Federal Crisis Inquiry Commission. Go read the settlements and all of the different bank settlements that they paid. The too big to fail banks paid $250 billion after getting $29 trillion plus another, $13 trillion probably in quantitative easing, where they bought the assets back off the books of the banks so that they could loan, right? They make money on fees. Do you know how banks work? It's just theft, man. It's theft. And the bottom line is they've got absolute control. And it was all illegal. Yes, how do I know it's illegal? Because I dealt with attorneys general all over the United States, just like Letitia James. Then I dealt with the top guys at the FBI, the top guy at the DOJ, the top guy at the SEC, the top guys, at the OCC in the office. I mean, I got the whole thing, man. And the truth has zero fucking value. It has no value. You all want to live in a world where the guys can rate with impunity. And you're cool with that. You're cool with your country being stolen from you, being looted. Look, I know it's hard for people that have to work all the time and don't understand how the world works and have to pay for their kids and they have to struggle through this thing. Dude, you're on the treadmill because of the way this system works, man. And you've got to follow the rules at your job or you get kicked out. How come they don't have to follow the rules at their job? If you stole and embezzled money from a company and you get caught, you're going to prison and your life is ruined. You don't get to keep that money. But with this situation, the CEOs grifted control fraud through Gresham's dynamic, through a whole variety of different ways through the mechanics of modern executive compensation to loot the world with other people's money. It's a brilliant concept if you don't understand how it works. But again, like engineers, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand this. It's racketeering. We all know criminal behavior because we watch great criminal shows all the fucking time, all over the place, and the writers of Hollywood know this stuff inside and out. And it's all a game, man. It's all the 3-card Monte, but the 3-card Monte is like a 26-level dice that's so complicated that it moves so fast, especially with technology, that unless you understand the basic mechanics of it, which is why we have to educate the world. And by the way, the final piece of the puzzle, if I'm able to raise $169 million, we're going to create a new party, but we're also going to have a national barnstorming tour that's like Live Aid, but with all of this information that I have. And trust me, we'll get everybody's attention. Especially the ultimate objective is to land on the Washington Mall sometime probably next summer before the presidential elections. And if you look at the way things are shaping up, what do we have? We've got Marianne Williamson's getting a lot of attention on TikTok, and she's saying a lot of great things, and Gen Z loves her. But she's saying things, again, with really great appeal and spirituality, if you will, but without the details that I'm revealing to you. We know that, Biden's going to run. He's going to make his announcement today. We know Trump's running. Trump can be guilty of thousands of crimes, and he's already raised probably $15 million for his presidential campaign. Meanwhile, he's going to go bankrupt eventually and hopefully thrown in jail on his watch, and who knows what's in the future. But he's a sideshow, man. He's a sideshow. He's a significant sideshow. But a functioning Department of Justice should have had that clown in the crosshairs right after January 6th. Not now, after he had, secrets down to Mar-a-Lago, and I could go on and on and on. Look, man, we got 8 days. Can you pony up $13 and invest? And you will be, if I can get that, besides the T-shirt and the bumper sticker, I honestly would love to bring in some major heavy hitters and go with an IPO downstream where, we build a new platform, a new media platform that does what nobody else has done. Tell the truth. They're all lying. They're literally all lying. How many of you remember Vice, right? It's still out there, but Vice was kind of a big thing, and this guy Shane Smith was kind of a big thing. Vice covered this up. Believe me, Shane Smith was a control fraud himself. And also their work, which was called Panic, they covered up everything I'm telling you. As did, quite frankly, and this is the most shocking to me, Frontline. They covered this up. Nobody's going to tell you this. The New York Times covered it up. I've got so much information. I'm working with some heavy hitters that's going to all come to the fore eventually. I've got a couple of celebrities that are in the mix and some major things that could happen. And I got to bring all of this stuff together. But I've got to build an organic grassroots movement of patriots who want to purge corruption. This is a tidal wave crusade to purge corruption. If you, me, and everyone you see who isn't a Nazi, who believes in dignity and liberty and sustainability and integrity, unite, we can defeat tyranny. And that is our destiny. Onwards and upwards, rise, roar, revolt. Failure is not an option. Please, jump on board. Let me see you come in. That was way longer than I wanted, but what the hell.